Good morning, I'm Joni Casey, President and CEO of IANA, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our first Industry Leader Session under IANA's Intermodal University program. This program was initiated 3 years ago and is designed to educate students and new entrants on the workings of the intermodal industry. Before we get started, though, I'd like to acknowledge our year-long Platinum Plus sponsors for helping to make this programming available. Also, the audience will be muted during the session and a question and answer period will follow the presentation. So please submit your questions at any time via the window on the control panel. It's now my great pleasure to introduce you to Katie Farmer, the Executive Vice President of Operations for BNSF Railway. In her current role, Katie oversees all of BNSF's organizational operations, which include engineering, environmental, mechanical, operations support, transportation safety and training, service design, and resource protection. Katie started her career in the railroad industry as a management trainee with the Burlington Northern in 1992. She's held a variety of positions in most areas of railroading, including sales and marketing, finance, customer solutions, and network operations. She's also served 2 terms as the Chairman of IANA, and it was my pleasure to work closely with her during that time. Katie, if you're ready to go, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Absolutely, Joni. Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. I was really pleased when Joni and Hal asked me to spend just a few minutes with this group. As Joni mentioned, although I do lead BNSF's operation now, I did spend several years working with IANA as chair of IANA, and many of the folks in the audience I know, and it's just great to be back with everybody. So I'm excited to have a conversation today. I've planned to just cover very few slides. I only have about 10 slides to cover, so we'll go ahead and advance to those. And Joni asked me to speak about a couple of topics today. The first topic Joni wanted me to cover was just a little bit about my career journey and where I've been and some of the experiences that I had. So although I have been with the former Burlington Northern and now BNSF for about 30 years, I can tell you that even though it's with the same company, the variety of experiences that I've had, everything from I began as an intern my junior year of college in our engineering department and worked my senior year, and then spent time as a corporate management trainee, was offered a job right out of school as a corporate management trainee in what was then our network operations center. From there, I had several different experiences, as Joni mentioned. Customer service, had responsibility for carload equipment management, moved into our industrial products business, worked in Houston actually during the time when the UP and the SP merged actually. So got to be a part of that down in the Gulf Coast and worked in sales, chemical sales primarily. Then moved back to Fort Worth and held a variety of positions in industrial products sales and marketing. From there, after about 18 or 20 years, I made the move to intermodal. And I can tell you that even though I had been with the company for about 20 years, moving into intermodal felt like a brand new company. I remember one of the first days in intermodal thinking, what is all of this new language, TOFC and COFC? And so really a great opportunity to broaden my experiences by moving into the Vice President of Domestic role. I had that role for a couple of years and then moved into the Group Vice President of Consumer Products role. And in that role, BNSF defines Group Consumer Products as our international business, our domestic business, and our automotive business. And so that was a great opportunity to interact with many of the members that I'm sure are on the phone today with IANA, and got to spend time in that role and had lots of great experiences until I moved to the operations role and took a move from the commercial team over into operations, was vice president of service design for a couple of years, and then most recently for the last 2 years have been the chief operating officer for the BNSF. So that's a little bit about my background. Now I want to tell you, for those of you that may not be familiar with BNSF, I'll give you just an overview of who we are. We are a company that's been around for 170 years. We are made up of 400 smaller railroads that came together to make what is now the BNSF Railway. We operate about 32,500 track miles. We operate in 28 states and 3 Canadian provinces. And we have approximately 37,000 employees, and we operate about 1,500 trains every day. As far as intermodal, we serve about 40 ports. We have 25 intermodal facilities. And let's see if I can scroll down. I can show you where those are. All right, there we go. Great. And we are the largest intermodal carrier in the world. These are the 25 facilities that we operate. Last year, BNSF moved about 10 million units, and that's a combination of both intermodal, agricultural commodities, coal, and industrial products. So we count a unit, the 10 million units, we count that as a boxcar, a trailer, a container, and a hopper, anything is a single unit. So with that context, and hopefully now we got the slides up and running, let's spend a little bit of time talking about safety. So I'm going to cover just a little bit around COVID and what we're doing around COVID, as well as safety. And so safety, obviously, for us at the railroad, we work in a very unforgiving environment. So safety is the most important thing we do for our employees, for the communities that we serve, and for our customers. So we already had a challenging environment, and then beginning in March with the pandemic, that got exponentially more challenging. And because we operate across such a vast network going through many municipalities and cities, we made the decision very early on that we were going to ground all of our decisions in the CDC guidelines and the local health guidelines of the communities that we serve. In addition to that, we also, while we could not have anticipated a pandemic, we did have good business continuity plans in place. And so as a railroad, I'll give you an example of some of the things that we had in place. We very early on when the pandemic hit, made the decision to separate our dispatching center. So we have all of our dispatchers located here in Fort Worth. They are a critical skill set, not easily replaced. And so we knew that we needed to go ahead and allow them to socially distance. And so we had a fully operational auxiliary location that we were able to take half of our dispatchers and separate the two dispatching locations. As I said, we made that move within the first couple of weeks when the pandemic hit. We are still operating that way, and we will operate that way for the foreseeable future. But that has allowed us to, when we have had a positive case, it has allowed us to not let that spread through the dispatching center and allowed us to maintain operations that are critical and have been critical through the pandemic to support not only the economy, but some of the frontline workers as well. In addition to that, we have been pursuing technology prior to the pandemic. All of our train crews already had iPads. So we moved very quickly when the pandemic hit to eliminate the paper copy track bulletins that our crews use. That would have required them going into the offices, printing out the GTBs or the general track bulletins. This way, all of our crews didn't have to interact with anybody in the offices. They could actually board the train, download their GTBs to their iPads. And so that has worked really well. And that's one of those things that we will continue to do going forward, even post-pandemic. So in spite of all of the challenges and the distractions with the pandemic, I am proud to say that our team responded. We set a goal to have kind of what we call next level safety numbers, and we are performing against those safety numbers on almost every metric. The metric that I pulled that I think would be relevant to this group is around our rail equipment incidences, which you can see here. Basically, we've reduced our rail equipment incident rates, which is basically the rate of train incidents per million train miles. So this can be a derailment, what we call a human factor incident, where we cause some type of damage to either our customers' equipment or their freight. And you can see that we've reduced that by about 30% since 2011. I am proud to say that we lead the industry in this area. We think it's the right thing to do, not only because we're committed to our customers, but also it's very important for the safety of our employees and the communities that we serve. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we see going on in the economy and with trade. So rail volumes prior to the pandemic in February, we started to see Asia manufacturing and Chinese production extend through the Chinese New Year and beyond. And so as those plant closures were extended, this resulted in lower import volumes to the US. And I know Joni and the team do a great job of putting out those statistics, but just for everybody on the call, containerized imports to the US were actually down about 6%, about 6.5% year to date, and almost 10% in the second quarter. So combine the extended Chinese New Year plant closures with the US imposed economic closures that we saw in the shelter in place due to the pandemic. North American rail volumes then fell by about 19% in the second quarter and 13% year to date. I will tell you that as we started to see the economy reopen, we are seeing some of the sectors do better than others. But overall, rail volumes still very soft across the industry. I will tell you for BNSF in total, we're down about 12% year to date. So on the retail side, which is primarily where we see consumer products and a lot of the intermodal business that we participate in, we really started to see the shift because of the pandemic from travel, tourism, really more towards some of the consumer products, the essentials, the durables, home improvement items were significantly up, as well as sporting equipment, outdoor furniture, those kinds of consumer durables. We also clearly, what was happening prior to the pandemic, saw an acceleration of the movement from bricks and mortar to e-commerce. And so that really drove a significant uptick in our LTL, our domestic intermodal, as well as some of our parcel freight as well. So we are beginning to see significant volumes in those areas, and I'll talk about that here in just a moment. But we're also seeing our automotive sector rebound. And part of that is driven by low interest rates. But in addition to that, we are seeing pretty significant ramp up, almost back to about 80 to 90% of where we saw automotive prior to the pandemic. The one sector that we are not seeing rebound is around rental cars. That's a big chunk of new car builds, and that is not rebounding because of the lack of business travel. Our agricultural shipments just down about 2% on a year-over-year basis, but I will tell you that's coming off a near record year previously. So our agricultural shipments have really not been impacted by the pandemic, and we anticipate in the third and fourth quarter of this year to see a really pretty sizable harvest and really good export moves on the agricultural product side. In the industrial products, anything related to oil and gas, as you can imagine, has pulled back substantially. So drilling pipe or frac sand pipe, anything related to oil and gas or the energy sector, crude, all of that, refined products significantly down. We are seeing, however, some signs of improvement in the non-energy related commodities such as plastics, building products. That is really starting to rebound coming off of the mid-second quarter lows that we saw. And we are seeing construction activity start to pick back up. And then finally, as you can imagine, as you're seeing across the board in the economy, coal, you're seeing a structural change with coal. We were down about 22% in coal year over year, and that's primarily related to low natural gas prices. It's also related to really relatively mild summer, and then as the U.S. economy shut down, the demand for electrical production really slowed, and so really significant decline year over year. So that's a look at what we are really seeing through the first half of the year. We are starting, as I mentioned, to see demand pick back up across many of our sectors, and specifically with regards to what we're seeing in intermodal. We really saw from really the first couple of weeks in June a significant impact, about 30% up on some of our hubs in Southern California, North Texas, as well as the Chicago area. Really significant increase to a point where we're handling on the domestic side and the LTL side peak-like volumes. So really seeing a big increase in our volume in that segment. Okay, so as our volumes fluctuate, our job is basically to match our resources with that demand. And when we talk about resources, we really think about that in a couple of different areas. The first area is in terms of our people, and so sizing the folks that we have on furlough, who we bring back, our track, what kind of expansion projects will we do, our locomotives, bringing locomotives into and out of storage, our rail cars. At one point we had miles and miles and miles of rail cars stored, and then looking at our terminals and how we size for work in our terminals. With all of that, obviously volume dictates how we manage those resources and how we work to handle the demand that's out there. With that said, I would say regardless of what we see on volumes in the economy, we continue to invest in our infrastructure. We recognize that if you forego investment in your infrastructure, it takes many, many years to catch up. It becomes a safety issue. It becomes a capacity and velocity issue for our customers. And so if I had a chart, you would see that over 25 years of BNSF's existence, even in periods of down volumes, we have continued to invest in our infrastructure and protect the core functionality of our network. This year is no different. On a capital plan of over $3 billion, $2.6 billion of that will be spent in our infrastructure. That's things that you can see on the chart. Rail replacement of nearly 500 miles. We'll put over 2.7 million ties, brand new ties in our railroad. And so again, we think that those things are critical for us to continue to protect the velocity and the safety of our network. In addition to that, we have to look at expansion projects not on a year-by-year basis, because many of the projects that we're involved in take multiple years to permit and construct. And so what we do is we look at our expansion capital on a 5-year rolling plan. And so although volumes were down, we had several significant capacity expansion projects that we were already in process on that we continued to work through during back part of last year into 2020, and we will continue to work through into 2021. I pulled just a couple of these to share with this group because I think these are most impactful to the intermodal segment. So a couple of opportunities that I wanted to talk about. First, in April of this year, we put into service the 4th main track at a location called Winslow, Arizona. Now, Winslow, Arizona is a crew change location for us. It sits on the Southern Transcon, and we added that 4th main track to create what, in essence, you can think of as almost like a passing track. And so, as you can imagine, we have many different types of freight that move across the Southern Transcon. You can have a 70-mile-per-hour intermodal train that's following a 40-mile-per-hour grain train. What a 4th main track at a crew change location allows us to do is to be able to handle different levels of speed and different types of service without impacting the velocity or the consistency of any of the commodities that we handle. The exciting thing about in servicing this 4th main track at Winslow, Arizona is it completes every crew change location along the Southern Transcon now has this capacity. So we really think that this is going to be a really big capacity and velocity enabler for us on the Southern Transcon. In addition, late last year, mid last year and into late last year, we opened up a new intermodal facility in Barstow, California. That is for additional capacity to serve the Southern California market. And so in addition to the 6,600 feet of additional track, we also put an additional 640 parking stalls there. And I can tell you we are glad that we have Barstow with the volumes that we're handling today. In addition to that, every year since we opened our North Texas facility, our Alliance Intermodal facility, we have expanded our capacity there. This year is no different. By the time we finish our capacity expansion at Alliance, we will be able to handle 1 million lifts a year at this facility. So we are looking forward to being in service there, and we are getting close on that. And then finally, at the very top of the slide, you can see construction is underway in Sandpoint, Idaho. That is at the very northern tip of Idaho. It is a place where on our railroad across the Northern Transcon, we connect then with the MRL, the Montana Rail Link coming up from the south. As many of you are aware, we have worked for the last decade in adding capacity across our Northern Transcon, whether it be double tracking, siding extensions. And the one choke point that still remained was a single track bridge across Lake Pend Oreille in Sandpoint, Idaho. So we entered into a multi-year project. It took us several years to acquire the permitting. We have done that. We are in the water now and actually constructing a second main on the bridge over Lake Pend Oreille, and we expect to be finished with that project in the next couple of years. And again, this will be really facilitate greater throughput and velocity into and out of the Pacific Northwest, both across our Northern Transcon and connecting with the Montana Rail Link. Okay, so in addition to adding physical capacity to our network, we're also looking for ways that we can get more out of the capacity that we have. And to do that, we are taking advantage of some of the technology that we have put in place over the last several years, whether it be our unmanned geometry cars, our detector, our wide-ranging detector network. We're taking advantage of all of the data that that technology collects and figuring out how we can use that data to really do predictive maintenance as well as improve velocity. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of examples of this. So the first is our brake health effectiveness. So what this is basically across our network, the Federal Rail Administration requires that we do brake inspections. And specifically, I'll give you an example. Across the Southern Transcon, we do a brake inspection, or we're required to do a brake inspection in Belen, New Mexico. What we did is we went to the Federal Rail Administration and asked the FRA if we could try a pilot where we could use detectors that pick up data relative to the brake health effectiveness of a train moving across the Transcon. We would take that data, we would know proactively before we got to Belen, New Mexico, whether or not the braking system was working. We tried a pilot, we've had good success, and basically what it allows us to do is if that train has the braking system working, we can go past the brake inspection at Belen, New Mexico, and then do that brake inspection when we arrive in Southern California. Now, this allows us to simply stop in Belen, New Mexico, fuel our train, and it saves us about 45 minutes to an hour for a carman to do a physical inspection of the braking system on the train. So again, we've had good success with that. We just got approval from the FRA to go ahead and roll out to additional trains on the Southern Transcon, as well as expand the pilot to our Northern Transcon. So we're looking forward to the velocity improvement and using data to be able to improve our service to our customers there. In addition, we're using the data that our unmanned geometry cars are collecting. We run these cars 24/7. They can inspect. Right now we have 5 to 6 cars. We'll have 6 by the end of the year. They can inspect close to 750,000 miles every year. And what this data allows us to do is to target places where we're seeing service interruptions, basically where we're having to take track out of service, interrupt the customer's flow of shipments, and it's allowing us to proactively use maintenance gains to historically look back and say, where are we seeing issues? Where do we continue to see issues? And what we found is that we're seeing those in what we call control points are a significant portion, almost 25% of where we're seeing track issues are in control points. Now, you might be asking, what's a control point? A control point, you can think about it, is basically a switch and a series of mechanisms that basically when you want to cross from one track to another, whether it be going from main track 1 to main track 2, if it's going from main track to a siding, that's a control point. And as you can imagine, we run heavy, long trains over control points. They require a lot of maintenance. Our ability to proactively look at where we have opportunities with control points to schedule that maintenance such that we have windows where they don't impact the customer shipment has allowed us to significantly reduce the time that's spent taking windows or time to surface or to do maintenance around our control points. A similar kind of thing relative to rail car exception. We took the historical data, we looked at on our fleet of cars, basically where were we seeing repeat offenders going bad order or having mechanical issues. So what we did is we used the data to specifically target proactive maintenance. This has allowed us to basically have an 80% success rate in non-repeat offenders on the car side. So both of these things are driving significant improvement in our service interruptions. We have a cross-functional team that's working on this. And I can tell you the result of this is this year alone, our service interruptions are down 17%. And more importantly, the duration of the service interruption is down 25%. So again, we think using big data and the technology that we've invested in our railroad will allow us to really improve our service to our customers. Okay. We also look for opportunities to inject additional capacity into the supply chain by leveraging technology at our intermodal facilities. So I want to talk about that specifically. As most of you know, we pioneered the automated gate system back in 2007, and about 90% of all of our volume now flows through the automated gate system across our network. The next advancement came in 2016, where we rolled out our RailPass mobile application. That basically took what used to be the automated gate system, which replaced the attendants, and took about 2 minutes and 15 seconds at the gate. RailPass allowed users to basically come in and out of our gates on an average of just over 30 seconds. So right now we have over 65,000 of our trucking partners that use this RailPass. Many of them have also downloaded the QR code associated with that, and that has further reduced down to just over 10 seconds at our gates. So getting our trucking partners through the gates more quickly, and we even think beyond that we can take all of the time at the gates out. And so right now we're piloting a touchless technology at our Seattle facility, working with a couple of our trucking partners, where we're actually transmitting back and forth between their onboard computer system in the cab with information from us at the hubs. And so we're having really good success with this. Think about it almost like a fast pass. You can move straight through. You don't need to stop at the gate at all. The driver has information about stalls, work events, etc. We know what's coming towards us. So we're going to continue to pilot this and stress test it at our Seattle facility, and fully expect that we'll continue to roll this out near the back part of the year and into 2021, basically eliminating all time at the gates at our intermodal facilities. Okay, so we also look to explore technology opportunities inside the gates at our facilities. And I know many of you have heard about our pilot on the east end of our logistics park, Kansas City. We've spent the last couple of years assembling this, ordering autostrads to be able to put a pilot together to really get a feel for how automation inside of a facility could work for us. So we went live in Kansas City in mid-February, and to date we've completed about 10,000 moves with the autostrad technology. Now, I know many of you on the call have worked with autostrad technology. It's used at the ports. It's used primarily in the international space for 20 and 40-foot ISOs. What we are doing is we're deploying it in Logistics Park, Kansas City, and we are using it not only on 20 and 40-foot ISOs, but also on 53-foot domestic boxes. So that's really the first time that that's been done. And you can see a picture of the autostrad here and how it works. And so think of a traditional hub where you use a crane to work across tracks. Typically what you would see in a traditional hub is you would have a hostler that would be moving around adjacent to the production tracks, taking boxes to and from a pile or to and from stalls, and then you would have trucking partners coming in and out of your facility. What the autostrad allows us to do is to basically continue to work the production tracks, and the autostrad then moves to a pile, potentially then a groomed pile, where then you can see the trucking partner simply comes in, backs into the stall with a chassis, and we load the box onto the chassis. So our hope is, and we've seen really good results through the first 10,000 moves, our hope is that we can continue to use this technology. We think it has big safety benefits inside of our facilities, really good efficiency and velocity benefits, and really streamlines the process with our trucking partners, potentially allowing us to eliminate hostlers inside of the facility. The final two pieces of automation that we are piloting across our network is we are looking at the use of autonomous yard trucks, and we are doing that at our Oakland facility. And we are also looking at remote crane operations in our Logistics Park Chicago facility. So many of you have seen remote crane operations. It's used extensively in Asia. We are using it in our Logistics Park Chicago facility to be able to operate the crane remotely, so you don't have the crane operator actually in the crane, operate it remotely, and our hope is that we would be able to use it to operate multiple cranes with single operators. We will continue to test this throughout 2020 and then make a decision about next steps with this going into 2021. So again, we're incredibly excited about the automation efforts. We think that this is really the future of automation inside of intermodal facilities, and as such, we would look to lead this effort. Okay, so the final slide that I have that I really think is the future of where intermodal is going is around co-location of logistics parks, co-location with our intermodal hubs. And basically, this is a model that we believe can drive significant reduction in distribution center costs. It really is a great synergy between the intermodal hub is the anchor, and it anchors the distribution centers that are nearby. So that we have many of our trucking partners that work with us that are co-located, ocean carriers, other entities that are streamlined, that help us to streamline the supply chain and really position retailers close to their markets. We know that a big focus of supply chains and that some of the large beneficial cargo owners are looking at is how do you get closest to your customers? How do I reduce drayage and transportation costs? How do I decrease emissions? We continue to look to work with our trucking partners to maximize truck turns and really keep drivers as productive as possible. So our economic development team continues to work with the supply chain with beneficial cargo owners. We actually have 3 of these logistics park centers. We have one in Chicago, one in Kansas City, and then one here in North Texas at our Alliance facility. So again, we believe that the future of co-location exists with intermodal hubs as the anchor for distribution parks, and we look forward to continuing to look for the next logistic park and continuing to grow out the 3 that we have now. So with that, Hal or Joni, I'd be happy to open it up for any questions or thoughts that the group might have.
Terrific, Katie. First, thank you so much for that. We're going to jump in because we've got a bunch of great questions here for you. Folks are really excited to have you here with us today. The first one, can you shed any light on the recent demand surge in domestic LTL and how BNSF is looking to respond to that?
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we really saw a significant increase that started at the beginning of June, and that was really the entire supply chain saw this surge. There's a couple of good articles out actually this morning, Journal of Commerce, a couple other sources talking about the entire supply chain has felt this surge in demand. Challenges with warehousing in Southern California. And so really, I would say the entire supply chain is trying to rebound and get resourced, if you will, for the demand that we're seeing. And so at BNSF, we really saw our demand pick up about 30% in some of our key hubs at Hobart in Southern California, Alliance, Texas, and Chicago. And so as you can imagine, we quickly moved to position resources to be able to handle that increase. And we did a couple of things. We activated storage. So I mentioned we had a lot of cars in storage. So we activated well and hitch sets, brought those out. We're down to a very few number that are in storage. We'll be 100% out of storage here before too long. We positioned, one of the big things that the entire supply chain was dealing with was the workforce. And so we flew people across the country. We added additional resources both in Southern California at our Alliance facility, took resources from the Chicago area, moved them out to Southern California to be able to position that. We added dray support at some of our facilities. We opened additional parking in Southern California. And what I would tell you is that we have turned the corner relative to trying to catch up, if you will, with that demand. But certainly it was a challenge to be able to position those resources. We have turned the corner. We did have an allocation, a temporary allocation that lasted for about a week in Southern California. We are back off allocation now and look to continue to hold our own going forward.
Great. That's super. That's a heck of a lot of activity to kind of scramble to meet those needs. Are you concerned with the diversion of traffic from the West Coast ports? And do you think that this is a growing trend or sort of where that might be going?
Well, I mean, certainly we would be concerned with the diversion of the West Coast ports. We still believe that the fastest and most efficient way to the interior of this country is through the West Coast ports. Tom Williams, my counterpart, who runs our intermodal business, is working very closely with the West Coast ports. And I know they have an initiative to continue to keep the West Coast ports competitive, and we feel, that we play a big part of that. So obviously BNSF is going to work. We've continued to invest. Some of the things I talked about today, we've continued to invest to make our portion of the supply chain as productive as possible so that the West Coast ports can be as productive as possible and as competitive in the world as possible.
Great. What do you see as some of the most critical things the industry needs to address in the next 5 years, say?
I think a couple of things that we stay focused on. One is we have to continue to evolve technologically. We know specifically as an industry when we look at intermodal that we have to continue to be as efficient as possible to continue to drive our cost base down. We see technology happening over the road. We know what that's going to do to the cost base. So all of the things that we talked about, BNSF is spending a lot of time and resources and capital, frankly, to be able to drive automation and efficiency into our supply chain. We know we need to continue to push to evolve how we do business intermodally. And really, that's because we don't have the luxury not to. We have to be able to drive that cost base down. I think the other thing that we have to continue as an industry to do is to fight for talent. You know, you don't often talk about that, but continues to be one of the things that we think differentiates companies, and that is the kind of talent that they have. That's why I love what IANA is doing with some of the colleges and the educational sessions that you all are doing, because for us, it certainly is competitive out there for the kind of folks that you want to work for your company. And I think that's needs to be a huge focus for us going forward as well.
Great, that's super. Yeah, I think we're excited. You know, as your stint as chairman, IANA's invested a great deal of time and energy into supporting development of educational programs in our scholarship schools in the multi-million-dollar investment range at this point for that program. And we appreciate all the hard work that the members have done to support that, and also the schools for the great work that they're doing. Dialing in back on the gate times, those are really impressive numbers. Are you looking at those as average times across all the implemented hubs that you're piloting those in, or is that sort of what you're shooting for once you get that technology dialed in and established across the whole network?
Actually, the times that I showed you were the average times across the facilities. So that's the folks that are using RailPass and have downloaded the QR code. That's the kind of times they're experiencing as they go through the gates. And ideally, what we'd like to do is continue to evolve to the touchless, where the average would be 0 across the gates, right? I like to think about it like the fast pass at Walt Disney World. You don't even slow down, you just go. And why not, right? I mean, with all the onboard technology that our trucking partners have, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to communicate with each other and just have our trucking partners be able to roll through the gates with no time delay there.
That makes loads of sense. Here's an interesting question. There are still a huge number of semi-trailers on the highway. What's the railroad car platform with which to capture this business, since you can't double stack a trailer?
So actually at BNSF, we handle a lot of trailers. And what I would tell somebody that is looking to experiment with intermodal is call us. So we would like to work with you to put lift pads on trailers. We run a very, like I said, significant trailer product. And we think it's a good way for people to try out intermodal. Like you said, make the conversion from over the road to intermodal. Now, I will tell you, however, that we see long term, all of us need to be as efficient as possible to be competitive in the supply chain. And so we do very much want to continue to move towards containerization of our product. We have many, many trucking partners that have worked very closely with us on converting from trailers to containers, large LTL carriers that are doing this because they understand long term the value and the capacity that it generates for their supply chain as well. So I would say that we want people to try intermodal. We don't want them to not try intermodal because they're moving in a semi or a trailer across the network. But long term, we do know that to take advantage of the capacity, the limited capacity that's out there, containerization is the most efficient way to do that.
Makes good sense. Do you see the privately owned domestic container fleet growing, and how does that affect your approach to intermodal, if at all?
So when you say privately owned domestic, you mean intermodal?
Non-railroad.
Non-railroad,
yeah.
But sure. So, well, as you know, our model, and just for the audience, BNSF's model is that we work with asset-based carriers. So we actually don't own the assets. That's not consistent with the rest of the way the industry does it. I would tell you that we often look at our model and have thought about it, but we keep coming back to, we think that we need to focus on what it is that we do well, which is run a fast intermodal railroad. And then we want to work with asset-based partners that can focus on what they do well, which is managing the time on the street, managing the box when it's not on the railroad. Now, with that said, we have lots of opportunities for people that are not asset-based owners to do business with us. And so we recognize that not everybody owns a trailer or container, and we've put lots of programs in place to be able to do business with that segment of the market as well.
Great, that's super. Here's a question, may or may not have insight into it, but in terms of what's happening in the market in Mexico and how that affects business here, it looks like it's going up and down, but any insights there? How will that affect the business on this side of the border, if you will?
So I probably am not the most up to speed because I don't price the marketing. So I don't do the Mexico business anymore, but I can tell you what I see as far as what we're handling. We have a joint product down there with KCS as well as FXE, and we continue to look for opportunities to participate in that market. We think it's a good long-term market. We've seen nice growth across our Mexico products going forward, really nice growth, especially on that I-35 corridor. And so we expected that would continue to grow. We want to serve that market. And as I mentioned, since the inception of the programs that we have down there, we've seen really nice volume growth into and out of Mexico.
Great. Here's sort of a bigger picture, almost a philosophical question, but has being a private company assisted in your ability to focus more on long-term solutions versus quarterly results?
That is a philosophical question. So what I would tell you is that it is great being a part of Berkshire. And we do believe that we can continue to look beyond the next quarter, if you will. When Warren bought us, he said, think about this like it's a family business and you're going to own it for the next 150 years, which is a great owner to have. With that said, I would tell you that even before Berkshire bought us, though, BNSF invested for the long term. And we always viewed our investment and our commitment to the market on a long-term basis. And so I would not say that we've changed the way that we've done that. And in fact, if you look at much of the infrastructure and the backbone of our intermodal franchise, much of that was done before the acquisition by Berkshire. So
great. Here's more of a sort of a bigger picture perspective, but from your seat, you're really kind of seeing, all the different areas of operation now. What do you see as the next big tech innovation coming to intermodal in, say, the next 10 years? So to give yourself a little bit of play there.
Yeah, sure. So I really think that our automation pilot at LPKC is going to be really leveraging for us. I think that the ability to reduce costs inside of the facility is going to be huge. And what we will look to do is to work with our trucking partners that will be automating outside the gate, as well as the big BCOs, to think about some of those innovation opportunities, right? And so we'll invest and focus inside the gate and on our railroad, but then we'll look to work with our big trucking partners as they will work with some of the larger BCOs to start thinking about, is there opportunities with autonomous trucking, innovation zones, basically, where we can look to say, what can the future look like for the supply chain? So we're really excited about that. We think with our logistics parks, we have the opportunity to, because we have the BCOs so close and our trucking partners have co-located around our logistics parks, we really think that we have a great model to be able to test that out.
That's great. All right, I think we've got time for maybe a couple more questions here. So I've got one, again, kind of riffing on technology. Does BNSF use its forward-looking focus on wayside inspection technology to show value to potential customers in terms of safety, reliability, and visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I could do a whole presentation on our detector network and how we use that. But really, the forward lean for our customers is really going to be around reduction of those service interruptions. So if I can know in advance that I have a piece of equipment, it doesn't have to be intermodal. If I have a coal train that has an issue with a wheel, and I can stop that coal train, remove that bad order car before I have a significant incident, that is going to pay dividends. That is paying dividends for the entire supply chain. I don't have a significant event that takes out a main track on the Transcon. And then the cross-functional effort that I talked about, where we have our transportation team, our mechanical team, our engineering team, every single week looking at service interruptions and saying, how do we prevent these? Most of the time, we come back to using technology. So we've invested in detectors, our PTC, across the board, the technology that we've invested in. Now is the time that we're going to leverage that data to improve velocity and drive down those service interruptions.
No, that's great. I think you're right. We've got at least another couple webinars of opportunity there. Do you foresee overall rail car utilization improving significantly in the next 6 months?
Absolutely. I'm seeing it right now. So if I could tell you the number of miles that we had cars stored during the second quarter, you guys would not believe me, I promise. And the other railroads were exactly the same. We are actively now bringing those cars out of storage. As I mentioned, when it comes to intermodal, we've got almost everything now out and running. And so now that we are getting resources in the position that we need them in. So again, part of the issue was around manpower at the facilities. We believe that we now have the manpower we need. We're going to turn those assets faster. We worked very hard to get bare tables and empty equipment out to the West Coast because we recognize that's a load coming back. So yes, I believe that you're going to continue to see equipment utilization improve.
I'm going to go back to philosophy a little bit, particularly for our colleagues in the schools and folks moving their way through their career. So, Katie, did you choose intermodal or did it choose you?
I didn't choose the railroad; it chose me. So, and all kidding aside, I chose the railroad at the time because I loved the people and I loved doing something that made a difference. And we often say at BNSF that being a railroader is a high calling and that what we do makes a difference. And I think that, the intermodal industry is a big part of that. And we've just come through a period where you can see what a difference intermodal makes to this country and the products that were moved, the support, so the folks that are on this call, the BCOs, the trucking companies, the railroads, our frontline workers are heroes, and what they've done over the last couple of months makes a big difference to this country. And so I think all of us ought to try to find something that they feel good about and it makes a difference every day when you go to work. And that's how the railroad chose me, and intermodal is a big part of that.
That's terrific. Well, with that, I can't thank you enough. That was a great way to wrap up. I'm going to turn it back over to Joni Casey.
Hopefully you're not expecting a song. Katie, thank you so much on behalf of IANA for your insight and perspectives. We certainly appreciate you taking the time this morning. Thanks again to today's attendees. I hope you enjoyed today's session. And for more information about our expanded educational programming, which you'll see more information on over the coming months, we're titling it The Business of Intermodal Continues because it absolutely does. We'd like you to visit intermodal.org and click on the educational tab on the website. We hope to see you registered for more of the sessions that'll take place between now and the end of the year. Thanks to the IANA staff, and Katie, thanks again.